It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. Coming up, the government's radical plans to tackle the court's backlog, scrapping jury trials for all but the most serious crimes. According to a memo written by Justice Secretary David Lammy, trials for rape, murder and manslaughter would be heard by juries. Everything else would be left to a judge, in a fundamental change to how the criminal justice system operates. Critics say the plans go far beyond previous recommendations to clear the backlog in our courts. But if this isn't the answer, what is? Also ahead, a blow for the family of Muriel McKay as the High Court blocks a new search for her body. Muriel was kidnapped and murdered more than 55 years ago, and her remains have never been found. Today, a judge ruled that the evidence to support a radar scan of a garden in East London is too thin, and accused her family of harassing the property's owners. I'll be speaking to Muriel's daughter and grandson. Plus, a warning that the online abuse of female athletes is so bad, the UK could lose out on the stars of the future. And we'll find out why Sir Keir Starmer got in trouble with the head as he went back to school yesterday. All that to come and much more on the UK Tonight. Well, we start tonight with what could be a breakthrough in talks to end the war in Ukraine. The country's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has told his European allies that Ukraine is ready to move forward with the framework of a peace deal. Ukrainian officials are now seeking an urgent meeting with Donald Trump, despite the Thanksgiving holiday in the United States, so the leaders can discuss any outstanding issues. Of course, any deal would also need the backing of Russia. And tonight, President Trump said he is sending his special envoy to Moscow to meet Vladimir Putin. Let's go straight to David Blevins, who is in Washington and can bring us the latest, because in the last 20 minutes or so, President Trump has taken to Truth Social to talk about this, David.
That's right, Sarah-Jane. I think this so far remains more of a briefing than a breakthrough. Since early morning, the Trump administration was briefing US networks that Zelenskyy had agreed to the Trump-brokered peace plan, but the wording has been very vague. And this evening, President Trump himself has taken over the briefing by posting on Truth Social. We'll not take time to read through everything he said, but I will summarise it briefly as this. He said that the team he leads has made tremendous progress with respect to ending the war between Russia and Ukraine. He talks about the original 28-point peace plan having been fine-tuned. He confirms that he is sending his peace envoy, Steve Witkoff, to meet President Putin in Moscow, and the Secretary of the Army, Dan Driscoll, to meet with the Ukrainians. But I think the key part comes right at the very end, where the President says, "I look forward to hopefully meeting with President Zelenskyy and President Putin soon, but only when the deal to end this war is final or in its final stages." Now, earlier there'd been much speculation that President Zelenskyy may actually travel to Florida rather than to Washington to meet with President Trump. Donald Trump leaves Washington for Mar-a-Lago, where he will spend the Thanksgiving holiday shortly, and he doesn't return until Sunday. But I think this latest post on Truth Social can be roughly translated as, I'll see you next week. I think they're acknowledging that they're not as close to a deal as they were suggesting earlier in the day. And that feeds into the vagueness around all of this. Throughout the day, they've been talking about a common understanding between Ukraine and the United States, and about Ukraine having signed up to the essence of a deal. That still feels very far short of the breakthrough that's going to be needed to bring this to an end, because Donald Trump has consistently demonstrated that he has an ability perhaps to agree the terms of a deal with Ukraine, or to agree the terms of a deal with Russia, but hasn't found the magic formula for bringing the two sides together, despite how desperate he may be to do that, not least because of the pressure he's under on the domestic front at home. But right now, it appears that we're still some distance from the deal that the President has been seeking since he became President for a second time more than a year ago.
David, thank you. David Blevins for the update from Washington there. Let's talk about this developing story in a bit more detail. I'm joined now by Sir Tony Brenton, former UK ambassador to Russia. Really good to have you on the programme this evening. Thank you so much. We were just listening to David Blevins there talking about the vagueness of the detail coming from Washington. Donald Trump saying he thinks he's close to a deal. What stage do you think we're at?
I think your David Bevan was his name. I thought he got it absolutely right. Everybody's been overclaiming how close they are to a deal. The Russians got pretty close, as they thought, back with their 28-point plan back on the 19th, all of a week ago, actually. Since then, the Ukrainians and with European support have been pushing back and did a deal, or close to a deal, in Geneva last weekend, all of 2 days ago. And Trump is now having to make up his mind between, as it were, the original Russian vision of how things should go and the Ukrainian view on how things should go. He's got various envoys out there talking to the Russians. Witkoff's about to go and see Putin. It's a sort of slow motion race between the Ukrainians and the Russians to hold Trump's ear for long enough to get what is vital to them into the deal. I think this is very unlikely, again, as your correspondent said, to be settled immediately. Both sides are pretty close. It's been a very encouraging few days in the sense that a lot of previously strongly held positions have been abandoned in the course of it. But to get it into harbour is going to take a bit more work. And it's striking that Zelenskyy, having been very keen to get to Washington this week, is now unlikely to get there till next week. But the main point I would make is that, yes, there's this contest going on. Yes, it matters, actually, crucially to Ukraine, who need US support to survive. Less so to Putin, who really thinks he's winning the war and could do without a deal. Nevertheless, both sides are keen to win this race. And as the two sides have grown closer, so the stakes in a way grow tantalizing closer as well. And we'll see how it goes next week.
Yeah, the right noises are being made, but, you know, as you've said, nothing concrete yet. And we hear this term, you know, there's an agreement on the essence of a deal. Again, it's all very vague language. And, you know, let's go back to this 28-point peace plan that was initially put on the table after that meeting between Trump and Putin. That was seen as too favourable to Russia by Kyiv. And the UK, alongside France and Germany, took another look at it and came back with some proposed changes. And Donald Trump has said himself there are a few disagreements between Ukraine and Russia that remain. Some of those are pretty fundamental, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, the key points of difference are three, really. First of all, there's the question of whether Ukraine should surrender territory which Russia has not actually occupied, which Ukrainians, backed by the Europeans, are adamant that they will not do, and the Russians are obviously very keen that they will do. Secondly, there's the question of how firmly you block Ukrainian entry into NATO. The Russians effectively went to war to stop Ukraine joining NATO, and they are adamant that there should be very clear limits on their ability to do that in the agreement, whereas the Ukrainians, backed by the Europeans, would much like actually to get Ukraine into NATO. They're not going to do that, but would like to keep the door open. And thirdly, there's the question of what security guarantees Ukraine gets, because everybody fears that we do the deal and everybody goes away and then Russia reinvades Ukraine, which nobody wants to happen. Not even, I suspect, the Russians, but nevertheless, Ukraine demands security guarantees. It is understandable why they do so. The question is where they get them from. And there was a big hint a couple of days ago that the Americans were going to provide them. That seems to have cooled. So there's a big issue there. It's those three issues which finally will settle whether a deal is doable. And it's unclear, frankly, whether we're going to come out on any of them over the next couple of days. Okay, let me put it another way. This is all down to Donald Trump, finally, and the people around him. Donald Trump, we all know, is a strikingly unpredictable man. And where he decides to go, the whole convoy will then follow him. But we don't know where he's going to decide to go.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I'm just looking at our Sky News website, our US correspondent Mark Stone, essentially saying Donald Trump's statement on Truth Social, his social post earlier on, was a holding statement. In that statement, he even says, you know, I'm not going to get involved until we're in the final stages of this, which tells us we're not at that point yet. He's neither going to see Vladimir Putin nor Volodymyr Zelenskyy. And it's interesting what you say about what way President Trump will be pulled. What do you think is going to be happening in the coming weeks to try and pull President Trump closer to one side than the other? Because something's got to give. You pointed out some of those fundamental differences there.
Well, Trump's prejudices, frankly, are firmly on the side of Russia. He doesn't take Ukraine seriously. He doesn't want Ukraine. He thinks Ukraine is basically a European problem. And he thinks he's got more serious business to do with Russia over strategic nuclear weapons, over detaching Russia to some extent from China, that sort of stuff. So he's unsympathetic to Ukraine, but he's getting lots of pressure from Europe and actually from Republican senators in the United States that you cannot simply ditch Ukraine. And he has to find his way through that. He's not a deft negotiator, if I can put it that way, but he does have a sort of animal feel for the way the wind is blowing. My instinct is that this is doable, actually. The divisions about NATO, there's not a serious division. Everybody knows that Ukraine's not going to join NATO. It's a matter of finding a way of making that clear. The territory issue is much harder. And my guess is that they'll have to do some sort of agreement over either the territory is handed over but demilitarized, or the territory is not handed over, but Russia maintains its claim to it. It's a difficult issue and impossible to predict. But they are doable. The security guarantee issue is very tough because the United States doesn't want to put itself in a position where if the Russians do invade Ukraine again, they're then dragged into war with Russia. And how you sort that out is basically the Europeans become crucial at this point because they could offer some sort of guarantee, except they don't really have the military strength at this moment to offer a credible guarantee. So again, there's a lot of work to be done. But to repeat something I've already said, what is encouraging is that everybody's now engaged. People are slowly making concessions on their long-held positions, and it may come out that we do find some common ground.
So, Tony Brenton, really good to talk to you tonight. Thank you so much for your view on what is happening in this peace process involving Donald Trump, former UK ambassador to Russia there. So, Tony Brenton, thank you. Now to another of the day's big stories, government plans which represent a fundamental change to how the criminal justice system operates. The Justice Secretary, David Lammy, has written a memo suggesting that only murder, rape and manslaughter trials should be heard by a jury, with everything else left to a judge. It's part of plans to clear the backlog in the courts, but critics are saying the plans go far beyond previous recommendations. Let's speak now to Chris Henley KC, who is former chair of the Criminal Bar Association. Really good of you to join us tonight on what could be a momentous day for the judicial system in this country. Your thoughts when you first heard these plans?
To be honest, I find it heartbreaking, shocking, and I'm afraid shameful that David Lammy, the person who was such an eloquent advocate for our jury system over the last few years, one of the most powerful voices speaking as to the fairness of outcomes of trials where juries sit compared to the alternatives, is now going to smash things up. When we had a real emergency, a real crisis in 2020, when jury trial effectively stopped because of COVID, and this sort of proposal was being discussed, these were his words. Jury trials are a fundamental part of our democratic settlement. Criminal trials without juries are a bad idea. And he told the government to pull their finger out and put, those were his words, and to put the necessary resources in. And the same is true today. It might make a tiny difference at the margins, the time taken to impanel a jury at the beginning of a trial. Perhaps a judge would reach the ultimate verdict a few hours earlier. But justice and confidence in our system and the integrity of verdicts, the fairness of the process will be destroyed. And David Lammy set out all of the reasons why he came to that conclusion in a really thoughtful, powerful review that he wrote in 2017. And I'm afraid the Leveson report is not a patch on that.
You have to wonder then, now that he is in the position of being Justice Secretary, what pushed him to change his mind on juries? Is it an indication of, once you're in a position of power, to try and make a difference, to try and clear the court backlog, get the wheels of justice turning, that actually he was left with no alternative plans? If not this plan, what? Because people are waiting years for justice. No,
the delays are appalling, absolutely appalling. But there's lots of things, big and small, that should be done and should have already been done. What David Lammy now thinks, who knows, because he's not really speaking to anyone. He's someone's leaking a memo instead, and that's supposed to serve as an alternative for him being grilled as to why he's changed his mind so profoundly. I seriously doubt that he has. I wonder, it's a bit cynical, but it's the budget tomorrow, and this perhaps is serving as something of a distraction.
Invitation to the Justice Secretary to come on to Sky News to talk about this. He knows this, you know this. So, you know, we will at some point be able to speak to the Justice Secretary about this. But when you talk about there are other things that could have been done that would have been more effective, what are they? And if they are the answers to the problem, why aren't they the ones that the Justice Secretary is selecting?
Well, can I give you just one example, two examples of the same problem? I'm in a trial at the moment, a murder trial, 5 defendants. On Friday, the defendants should have been produced at court at 10 o'clock. We were told, oh, there were problems, they should be here by 12. Weren't at court at 12, weren't at court at 12:30. At 12:45, we were told they hadn't even left the prison and they wouldn't be at court until 3:30. The day's business had to be abandoned. This morning, I was in another hearing at another court, 6 teenage defendants. There wasn't the capacity to bring them to the building, and they were in different locations, and the technology didn't exist or wasn't working, or there was some sort of problem, which meant that they couldn't even join the hearing remotely, which is increasingly common. There are so many basic things. I mean, the late delivery of defendants, it bedevils every court in the country every single day. Hundreds of hours are wasted. Trials are lost. The latest stats from the Institute of Fiscal Studies showed that 1,000 trials didn't take place last year because there aren't enough barristers to prosecute and not enough barristers to defend. So think of the number of witnesses and victims who've really, got themselves prepared for the tough ordeal, tough for everybody involved, witnesses, victims and defendants, all vulnerable, all no doubt very anxious. But trials fail because of the lack of resources, the lack of infrastructure. Our buildings are collapsing, our courts sit empty. That's what should be done, not just the destruction of the integrity and fairness of our justice system.
You've pointed out that we've not heard directly from the Justice Secretary today, but we have heard from a representative of government on Sky News this evening, Pat McFadden, the Work and Pension Secretary, the details of this memo put to him earlier in our Politics Hub programme. Let's just listen to his response.
Juries have been at the foundation of our justice system for a very long period of time. I mean, this would be quite the move, wouldn't it?
Well, of course, there will still be jury trial.
Only potentially for some of the most significant court cases.
The story says that it may be for a narrower range of alleged offences. Let's see what the MOJ have to say about that. We do, of course, value, respect and cherish trial by jury, but we also have to cherish the idea that people can have their case heard in court in good time. And we've got an enormous backlog, and simply doing what we've been doing for the past few years is not addressing that backlog sufficiently quickly. So I wouldn't be surprised if my colleagues at the MOJ are looking at perhaps some radical ways in how they can reduce that backlog.
It's worth reminding people watching, Chris, why you feel juries are so integral to the judicial system, because, we are hearing that they will be still included for the most serious of crimes like rape and murder, but not in others. Why do you think it's integral to have a jury at the heart of the justice system?
Well, because it brings a range of different people with a range of different backgrounds into court to hear all of the evidence, hear all of the arguments, and then sit together, challenge each other's prejudices. This is exactly what David Lammy articulated in his review. And he said that the one real success story in the whole of our justice system was the jury. When you tested it by any metric, their results were fair and consistent. And when his words were, this positive story about the jury system is not matched by such a story for magistrates' verdicts. And he said the same about Crown Court judges, I'm afraid. We all have prejudices. One person making a decision day in, day out, they become case hardened, they're too influenced by their own narrow experience, having a range of eyes and voices debating until they reach a solid, sure decision. That's what is something that we've always been so proud of. It goes back hundreds of years. I mean, I could quote you jurists, historians who talk about the importance of juries and how embedded it is in our constitutional settlement. Words, again, which David Lammy used himself just a few years ago. I've no idea. I've absolutely no idea why he's changed his mind. Nothing objectively has changed. So I can't wait to hear him challenged and have his own words put back to him. It's a terrible day. It's going to ruin lives.
I was going to say exactly the same thing. At some point, he will be interviewed about this, and exactly what you said, the words that he has used before becoming Justice Secretary will be put to him, and he'll be able to state his case, because at the moment, we just have this leaked memo to go on, but it is indeed, you know, causing a stir, such a radical move, a huge shake-up of something that, as you point out, has been, you know, part of our justice system for hundreds of years. Listen, Chris, I'm sure we'll talk about this again. It's not the last time we'll be talking about this subject. Chris Henley KC, barrister at Mountford Chambers and former chair of the Criminal Bar Association. I really appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Thanks.
And now today, a High Court judge blocked a request from the family of Muriel McKay. This was to search for her body in a back garden at an East London property. Muriel McKay was kidnapped and killed in 1969 after she was mistaken for the wife of media mogul Rupert Murdoch. 2 men were convicted and jailed for Ms McKay's murder in 1970, but to this day, her body has never been found. Well, the McKay family had been seeking permission to radar scan a site on Bethnal Green Road where they believe Muriel could be buried. But today, a judge described the evidence to justify that search as thin and criticised the family's conduct, accusing them of threats and harassment towards the property's residents. Today, I spoke to Muriel's daughter, Diane McKay, and her grandson, Mark Dyer, to get their reaction to the ruling. And I began by asking them how this fresh evidence had come to light in the first place.
The information has come from a lady who now lives in Israel, and her father, before he died, he gave her a whole statement of something that had been worrying him all his life, many years, and he said that there was he told the story. And the way he told it, it led us to really believe, that that's where my mother's burial place was finally. Not originally, but she was moved to this place.
It's very important to know that this address, the reason it's so interesting, there was a phone box opposite it, and at that phone box, the final ransom drop was started on the 5th of February 1970. And this was the phone box we had to go to and take the call. And the caller to that phone box said, "I can see there's no one around you. Proceed to the next phone box, here's the address." And that leads us to believe that Arthur Hussein was actually in the shop at the time and watching. That was the point, he was watching that ransom drop.
So, Mark, all of that information has led you to this property, and that is the property that you wanted to carry out this survey, and you took it to the High Court today, the judge saying that he had to consider the case objectively and dispassionately, but was not persuaded that even if a survey was carried out, that it would be conclusive one way or the other, that it would produce incontrovertible data. He added the evidence of the presence of Muriel McKay's remains at the premises, such as it is presently, seems thin. The High Court have denied you your request. Diana, I'd like to ask your response to that.
Well, I'm very disappointed, but we have to continue with the legal process, and we will. That's all I can say. We're not giving up just because the judge says, no, you can't go in.
Well, our belief is, in the legal process, that we will prevail and we will get into the property to do the scan eventually, be allowed in by somebody. All we want is an end to this life sentence for my mother and her siblings. And the life sentence they've got is that they've never had an answer. They haven't spoken to their mother since the 29th of December 1969, when she was hooded and bound outside her own home after having returned from the dentist, and thrown in the boot of a car, and must have had some terrible hours.
I do just have to put this to you both. The judge also said today that although he didn't think the evidence was compelling enough, he would have rejected the application anyway because of your egregious conduct. This was something that came out in the process of this, and I just want to give you a chance to respond. One of the homeowners opposed this injunction bid, which would have stopped her and the owner of the other property from disturbing their garden. The judge saying, it seems to me that in your desperation to find an answer to what happened to Muriel's body, the claimants and Mr. Mark Dye have lost a sense of perspective and also respect of the interests, concerns and safety of others who are perceived to stand in the way of their campaign. The judge adding that this included threats, deception, dishonesty, lies, bullying and harassment. Your response to that from the judge at the High Court?
This is based upon a statement given, a very flowery statement given by the opposition, the opponent. In this kind of litigation, you cannot give a statement against it because that's the final saying. So once that statement goes in, you can almost say whatever you want, and I can assure you that we always behave properly, and we are only interested in one thing, in trying to obtain access legally and use the legal system as we always have done. So it's a sad swipe at us, but we believe that, and we've been asked for compensation, and we believe sadly that we're going to have to, in the end, probably pay money in order to achieve a scan, which isn't right, is it really?
The family of Muriel McKay. Still to come on the UK Tonight. Last-minute announcements from milkshake taxes to minimum wage rises. We'll bring you all the details ahead of tomorrow's budget. And the creative father Ted is cleared of harassing a transgender activist, but found guilty of criminal damage to their phone.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
On the eve of the budget, the government has announced an increase to the minimum wage, meaning a pay rise for millions of workers. Chancellor Rachel Reeves says the main living wage will go up by 4.1% from April to £12.71. For a full-time worker over the age of 21, that will mean a pay rise of £900 a year. Meanwhile, the Health Secretary has announced that the sugar tax will be extended to include pre-packaged milkshakes and lattes. It's part of new measures to tackle obesity. Here's what Wes Streeting said in the Commons earlier today.
Obesity robs children of the best possible start in life, hits the poorest hardest, sets them up for a lifetime of health problems and costs the NHS billions. So I can announce to the House we're expanding the soft drinks industry levy to include bottles and cartons of milkshakes, flavoured milk and milk substitute drinks. We're also reducing the threshold to 4.5 grams of sugar per 100 millilitres. Mr. Speaker, this government will not look away as children get unhealthier, and our political opponents urge us to leave them behind. Thank you.
The only thing I would say is at least we're hearing it first in this House and not on Sky.
Oh, well, we do know a lot already, don't we? And you've probably heard about it through Sky News. From this man, in fact, our deputy political editor, Sam Coates, who's been following all the twists and turns of the build-up to the budget, because we know so much already, don't we, Sam? We wonder what there is left for Rachel Reeves to tell, but tell us she will tomorrow. And there's a lot at stake for her, isn't there, tomorrow morning, and indeed this government.
That's right, Sarah-Jane. Look, this is effectively an existential moment for this government. It's the biggest political moment of the year. It's a moment that Rachel Reeves wanted never to have to actually confront. Tomorrow, she will come to the Commons at lunchtime to put up taxes in the order of 20 to 25 billion pounds. That's barely a year after she said that she wouldn't have to come back and ask for big more tax rises in future, because she claimed last year that she'd solved the problems in the public finances. But here we are. There's a black hole, really largely, it has to be said, because of demands for extra welfare payments from Labour MPs. They didn't like the two-child benefit cap. That will go. That cost £3 billion. They wanted to reverse the winter fuel scrapping that we saw shortly after Rachel Reeves came into the Treasury. They blocked welfare reforms in the summer to the tune of £5 billion. The triple lock is costing a lot, in the order of £7 billion for this year's uprating of the pension, and on and on. So the reasons for the black hole aren't predominantly things like Brexit and the long tail of austerity, but choices that this government has made. But really, I think it's going to be the reaction amongst the public and the markets that's going to determine whether or not this budget is a success. For the markets, they'll be asking whether or not she's effectively now managing and got out of this doom loop where she's coming back year after year with more demands for tax hikes. Has she avoided and done enough to make sure that won't happen this time next year? And for the public, well, Rachel Reeves isn't pulling one big lever. She abandoned the thought of maybe raising income tax, but has what's known as a smorgasbord, an array of much smaller tax rises in order to fill the bill and fill the hole. The question is, do any of those blow up in her face, rather like George Osborne found when he put up an array of smaller taxes back in the omni-shambles budget and had to retreat on some of those? So quite how all of this lands, quite how people take it, there is no doubt most of the country is going to be less well off after tomorrow, and growth is going to be downgraded. It's not going to be a pretty moment, but just surviving at the moment seems to be this government's aim.
Sam, thank you. Sam, you'll see plenty more of him tomorrow from 11 o'clock onwards. The budget, Sam and the team taking you through everything. The pressure really on Rachel Reeves when she gets to her feet in the Commons tomorrow. Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, has been taking a look at the key challenges facing her.
That was a year ago. That was the budget where Rachel Reeves said this was going to be the big tax-raising budget. She wasn't going to have to come back for much more. How have things changed so much in just 12 and a bit months? Well, the main thing you've got to know about this, OK, there are two factors here. The first of them is the fact that the economy isn't doing as well as a lot of people had hoped. This is just showing you productivity, which is kind of the best measure of how well off, how much better off we're getting each year. It's our bang for our buck across the economy. And up until 2008, it looked like that was kind of going perpetually higher. But then, as we all know, it didn't go higher. So it's basically flatlined or gone up really weakly since then. You can see the pandemic there. And the gap between where we might have been and where we are now is 23%. We are 23% poorer than it looked like we might have been. And that feeds into everything else. So that's 23% less in tax revenue, which means a hole in the budget. So that's number one part of the hole, and we're going to hear more from the OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, about that. The second part of the hole is a year ago or so, Rachel Reeves had all these plans about cutting welfare, and a lot of them haven't happened. And as a result of them, these U-turns, the welfare bill is forecast, this is forecast off into the future, is forecast to carry on rising. And so those two things together, extra spending on the one hand and less money coming in because the economy's not doing as well, they're the two main dynamics overshadowing this budget, raising the question, what does the government do about it? Well, the main answer, we suspect, is going to be something economists call fiscal drag, which I know is terrible terminology. I'm going to illustrate how it actually works, though, because this is really important. It means basically you're raising extra money without having to raise the rate of income tax. That's showing you the median income, so average salary, average incomes across the economy before tax, going back the last few years. And this is the critical thing, is the personal allowance. That's basically the point at which you start having to pay tax on your income. So anything below that line, that's untaxed income. Anything above the line, that's tax. That's the tax, basically, that you have to pay. And here's the key thing. Look at that line. Under the coalition government, they increased that quite a lot. And then, in the last few years, that has been left flat. And as it's been left flat, have a look at this. As that's been left flat, the gap between these two has got bigger. The amount that we have to pay on our earnings in tax has got bigger. And if, as is expected, Rachel Reeves decides to leave that flat, so to freeze the personal allowance for another few years, look at what happens here. Even if our earnings go up, the amount that we're squeezed by taxes goes up. And just to kind of underline this, back in 2019, 52% of income of the average earner was taxed. If that continues, it's going to be 64%. So that brings in quite a lot of extra money because we are going to be paying more in tax because of fiscal drag. But the question is that Rachel Reeves is facing, how does she raise the other money that basically will fill that hole in her budget?
Well, we may find out tomorrow. Ed Conway, also part of the team, taking you through the budget here on Sky News throughout the course of the morning and afternoon tomorrow. Still to come on the programme this evening, account timeouts and comment limits. We are talking about Ofcom's new guidelines to better protect women and girls from online abuse. Father Ted co-creator Graham Linehan has been cleared of harassing a transgender activist on social media. However, the 57-year-old was found guilty of criminal damage caused to Sophia Brooks' mobile phone in London last year. District Judge Bryony Clark called his comments deeply unpleasant, but found they were not oppressive. He has denied all of the charges and spoke outside court earlier today.
I am very pleased by today's verdict. The judge found me and the women who gave evidence on my behalf to be credible, honest witnesses and said that my actions were not criminal and did not constitute harassment. There are a group of dangerous men who are determined to bully women and girls and to misuse the courts and police in furtherance of a misogynistic agenda. I'm proud to have stood up to them and I will continue to do so. I'm grateful to the Free Speech Union for their unwavering support and for helping to ensure that those who speak out against these dangerous activists are protected.
Campaigners gathered in Westminster today demanding an end to femicide. They're calling for urgent reforms to tackle systemic failures, particularly those affecting black, minoritised and migrant women. Sky's Sadia Chowdhury was there.
This group of people, made up largely of women, come here every year outside Downing Street with one clear message.
Justice for all women! Justice for all women!
My name is Yasmin Javid. I'm the mother of Fawzia Javid, who was brutally murdered alongside her unborn baby on September the 2nd, 2021 in an honour-based abuse crime.
My name is Sean Case. I am the brother of Michelle Sparman, who sadly took her life in August 2021. I now have the actual death certificate, and it just says death by suicide when her mind was disturbed.
We've had our hearts ripped into millions of pieces. It's not getting any easier, it's getting more and more difficult.
Black, minoritized and migrant women are disproportionately affected by domestic homicide, suicide driven as a result of domestic abuse.
Next year will mark 20 years since Banaz Mahmood was killed by her cousins in a murder ordered by her own father.
We're calling for a Banaz's law where honour-based abuse is recognised as an aggravating factor for sentencing. We are also calling for suicide to be recognised as murder if it's a result of domestic abuse.
The group here say that 2 women are killed every week by a partner or an ex-partner, and that domestic abuse-related suicides is on the increase. They've given the Prime Minister 2 weeks to respond to their letter, inviting him to meet with the families to address these problems and find a way forward.
A man has been arrested in connection with a mountain of rubbish illegally dumped near the River Cherwell in Oxfordshire. The 39-year-old from the Guildford area is being questioned following an investigation into this 40-foot-high waste heap that appeared alongside the A34. Last week, the Environment Agency declared the illegal tip a critical incident. Ministers have backed a Heathrow expansion plan that would involve moving the M25. A shorter runway proposed by a group which owns land and hotels nearby was also being looked at, though apparently it didn't consider all development costs. We are told no taxpayer money will fund it. The founder of Virgin, Sir Richard Branson, says he is heartbroken following the death of his wife, Joan Templeman, at the age of 80. The couple were married in 1989 and have 2 children. Writing on social media tonight, Sir Richard called his wife his best friend and guiding light. There was a warning today that UK sport could miss out on its stars of the future. Such is the level of online abuse facing female athletes. Well, now Ofcom is proposing new guidelines for social media companies to better protect women and girls online. Our sports correspondent Rob Harris has more details.
During the Euros, the racism sent to Jess Carter ignited calls for action. The Lioness powerfully revealing to me immediately after winning the trophy how online hate nearly forced her to quit.
Without the fans, my family, my teammates, I'm not sure that I'd ever had the courage to go back on the pitch and play again. I'm not really someone who struggles with, the hate that they receive because everyone's going to have their opinion. But this tournament's been really tough. and I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to like come back on the pitch and do me. And every one of those fans, I'm not ever going to be able to show my thanks enough.
But 4 months on, while Carter's been adding to her trophy collection in America, still no sign of a fresh impetus to tackle abuse from social media platforms. Now Ofcom is stepping in. The boss of the communications regulator telling me how tech firms need to make it safer online, particularly for women and girls, and particularly for sports stars.
I think we're going to lose talent in sport. Lots of places where women in particular feel that, you know, if they go out there in a public role, they just get abused, and sometimes the toll on them and their families is not something that they can manage.
Ofcom has now advised the likes of X and Instagram to include prompts telling users to reconsider harmful messages, stopping payments if posts promote misogynistic abuse and sexual violence, and ensuring For You recommended posts have more perspectives and are not toxic echo chambers.
It's not about curtailing anyone's freedom of expression. It's about nudges and prompts. It's about better reporting. It's about clearer privacy settings. All of these ideas have come from experts or victims or survivors themselves.
There is an urgency. Sky News recently revealed suspected online hate crimes referred to police have quadrupled this season in English football. And for former England star Leanne Sanderson, the Ofcom recommendations are lacking.
I feel so passionately about there needing to be online identification to have an account, because someone like myself has had death threats. I'm a woman of colour, you know, I'm gay. There's loads of things that people can't handle, and that's where it comes to me. It's not even about my job.
The job for tech firms, not just prioritising profit, but protecting users. And if moves to reduce toxicity and trolling fall short, Ofcom says it will ask the government to strengthen online safety laws, but not for 2 years, when action is being demanded now to clean up their sites from vicious abuse. Rob Harris, Sky News.
Coming up here on the UK Tonight, an apology from the Prime Minister as he gets into trouble with the head teacher. And Arne Slot says there's no excuse for Liverpool's terrible form, which he has described as almost ridiculous.
This program is delivered by DHL, the official logistics partner of VSL.
Welcome to the DHL Sports Hub on Sky News. Coming up, a former England cricket captain tells the current squad they must become more ruthless after losing their Ashes opener in Australia. And following an emphatic North London derby win that leaves them 6 points clear at the top of the Premier League, can Arsenal now go on to win their first title since 2004? We will hear from their record goalscorer Thierry Henry. But we start with Formula One and what's set to be a dramatic climax to the season after a double disqualification for McLaren at the Las Vegas Grand Prix, which has left a genuine three-way title fight that could feasibly go down to the final race of the campaign in Abu Dhabi next month. It was Max Verstappen who won in round 22, but championship leader Lando Norris was second, and with second place Oscar Piastri fourth too. At that point, it meant Norris led Piastri by 30 points, with Verstappen another 12 back, and the Briton holding a huge advantage over his rivals. But in a dramatic twist, McLaren team principal Andrea Stella and other senior staff were summoned by stewards after it was found both Norris and Piastri's cars had exceeded the absolute limit of 9mm for skid block wear. Each had less than that remaining, and as was the case in the same circumstances for Ferrari in China earlier this year, they were removed from the race result. Stella went on to explain, during the race, both cars experienced unexpected high levels of porpoising not seen in the practice sessions, which led to excessive contact with the ground. As the FIA noted, the breach was unintentional, there was no deliberate attempt to circumvent the regulations, and mitigating circumstances also existed. We apologise to Lando and Oscar for the loss of points today at a critical time in their championship campaigns after two strong performances from them all weekend. As a team, we also apologise to our partners and fans whose support means so much. While this outcome is extremely disappointing, we remain fully focused on the last two races of the season.
They all carry a plank on the floor of the car, which is 10mm, 1 centimetre thick, and it is to guarantee that the cars do not run too close to the track. And that's partly a safety measure, because if they bounce off the track, the aerodynamics can detach heading into a corner, they could crash. It also in a sense, curbs the peak performance for everyone. The two McLaren cars were found to have fallen foul of the rules by a tiny margin. In Lando Norris's case, by just over 1/10 of a millimetre, a 0.12 of 1 millimetre. That is the width of a human hair.
Wow.
And it is by that margin that he has been disqualified from this Grand Prix. A tiny bit more in Oscar Piastri's case. So it's a tough one, but ultimately it's clear in the regulations and specific, and there was only ever going to be that outcome as soon as the scrutiny is checked and found the two McLaren cars to be deficient. And actually in the stewards' report, they noted that the measuring equipment that the FIA use is accurate to within 1/1000th of 1 millimetre. So no wriggle room for McLaren.
The lower you can run your car to the ground, especially in these kind of Formula One cars, the quicker you go. The more downforce you generate, the more the car gets sucked to the ground. It's quicker in corners, it's more efficient down the straights, the quicker you go. So Lando Norris, while he didn't win the race today, managed to get his way back into second. He was quickest in qualifying yesterday. Now, there are all sorts of reasons McLaren will be explaining as to why they weren't able maybe to get the true read of whether their skid block wear. Maybe they thought it was going to be a two-stop race, a one-stop race. Maybe their bumps were worse than expected. Maybe they didn't get enough read on the conditions in Thursday practice that might lead to that, but it doesn't matter. You run your car too low, then you're getting an advantage that the other teams would consider unfair because it's breaking the rules.
Well, Norris is still out in front, but the cushion between him and Piastri remains at 24 points. Remarkably, Verstappen is now level with the Australian, having been 104 points behind him 3 months ago. With the sprint and full race coming in Qatar this weekend, Norris will still be champion if he has a lead of at least 26 points after Sunday. Well, Verstappen finished with a flourish in Las Vegas, posting the DHL fastest lap on his final rotation as he took the checkered flag. That's his third of the year, with Norris on 6 and Piastri with 5, meaning one of the McLarens will take the overall prize. Yuki Tsunoda was involved as he and Red Bull recorded DHL fastest pit stop of 1.99 seconds, the 6th fastest time of the season. It was only actually Tsunoda's third best of 2025, with the Japanese driver even quicker in Sao Paulo and Hungary. Verstappen completed a Red Bull clean sweep as he was named Driver of the Day, presented by Salesforce. He took 26.2% of the fans' vote after starting second on the grid and overtaking Norris at the first turn on the way to his second victory in Nevada and 6th of the year. Nasser Hussain says England's cricketers must become more ruthless if they're to find a way back into their Ashes series with Australia. They are 1-0 down after losing the first test by 8 wickets, despite dominating for large spells. Travis Head's 123 off just 83 balls was ultimately decisive, and now Hussain wants a positive response when the second test gets underway in Brisbane on December the 4th.
Game is never won. If you've been around as long as some of us have, this game will jump up and bite you, especially in Australia for the reason he gives. You give them a little sniff. They may not be the greatest Australian side of all time, but they will be tough. They don't produce soft cricketers. You give them a sniff and you wake that crowd up, wake them up here, or you go to Brisbane and you wake them up there, then you are in trouble, as they found out yesterday. And it is something this side is very guilty of. They are not ruthless. There has been a number of occasions they have been ahead of the game where someone should have said, no, not today. We are 99 ahead, 1 down. We just bat now. We don't need to be flirting outside the off stump, driving on the up. We need to duck out the way of the bouncers. We need to get a lead of 250, 300, and then say, Travis said, going back like that, if you're chasing whatever they were chasing, you get up past 300, he has to play slightly different. When it's a smaller target, he gets off to a flyer, the game is done.
England's Rugby Union head coach Steve Borthwick says Tom Curry's character is impeccable after the flanker clash with Argentina's Felipe Contepomi following Sunday's international at Twickenham. Contepomi claims to have been smacked by Curry after England's 27-23 win. The Argentina coach has also accused him of a reckless challenge on Juan Cruz Malia, which left him with a significant knee injury, and England have been asked to provide their version of events ahead of a possible investigation.
Clearly I'm aware there was an incident. I didn't see it, I wasn't there, I was in the changing room at the time. I'm aware of it. Clearly I wouldn't want that any incident like that to be the centre of attention of what was a tough, hard test match where two teams really went at it for the afternoon, and That's all I've got to say, really. But I think that anybody in this room who has had any contact with Tom Curry knows as a character of a man, his character is impeccable. He's a fantastic team man and a very respectful guy. So I think Tom Curry's character is unquestionable.
Now they're 6 points clear of Chelsea at the top of the Premier League with a cushion no other team has ever given up from this point of the season. But can Arsenal finally end their 22-year wait for another title in the months ahead? Well, Sunday's 4-1 derby win over Tottenham Hotspur, largely thanks to Eberechi Eze's hat-trick, certainly suggests they've got what it takes. Mikel Arteta's side are now unbeaten in 15 games across all competitions, winning all bar 2 of them. Former Arsenal forward Thierry Henry says they should relish their challenge.
No, this is not me talking as an Arsenal fan. It is me saying at one point you have to embrace it. People were talking about the process. It's not believing in the process anymore, it's happening. You have to be honest. We put ourselves in a situation where we have, I do believe, the best squad. You're not complaining anymore about missing 1 or 2. So you need to make sure that you can win the league. I'm not saying you're going to win it, but you need to act like it. You are favourite. Embrace it. Not know anything. Like we all know it's going to be difficult against Chelsea. We all know we have the game at in midweek against Bayern Munich. But it's time to deliver. And you need to embrace it. It's not me trying to put pressure. It's not. If I was in that dressing room, that's how I would have come back in the summer. I would have said, guys, it's time. Enough of messing around. We need to now put a performance this year where people are going to be scared of us.
This program is delivered by DHL, the official logistics